Hey everybody, my name's Lucy and I'm a PhD student at the University of Birmingham, and today I want to talk to you about maybe a slightly more serious topic, and I want to share my dyslexic story in academia, in higher education, in life. I think this is a really important topic. It is also currently Dyslexic Awareness Week, and I think that's so important because there's still so much stigma around being dyslexic. I've certainly come across some stigma in my time, and I think the more we talk about it and the more we share our stories and normalise it and show that you can be dyslexic and it doesn't hinder anything is so important. I have known I have been dyslexic since I was 8 years old. I probably, to be honest, knew before that because some of my earliest memories of schools are taking dyslexia tests. Now you might be wondering what kind of school tests like 5-year-olds for dyslexia? My parents were both dyslexic. They knew there was a very high chance that me and my brother would be dyslexic as well. So they made sure to put us into a school that had a specialised learning disabilities department. They had a whole team. There was a building for people with dyslexia. It was incredibly common and normal in the school I went to be dyslexic. Not everybody had dyslexia. I would say within my year of about 90 people, off the top of my head I can name maybe 5 to 10 who were dyslexic, so about 10% of the year. I grew up in a really supportive environment for dyslexia where it was completely normalised. Nobody was made to feel lesser for it. You had an abundance of support and help. There was always more support and help available to you. So my experience from the age of 4 to the age of 16 when I went to this school with my dyslexia was super positive. By the time I was 16, I already had a pretty firm handle on my dyslexia. I knew the elements of my dyslexia that were most problematic for me. I knew how to deal with it. I had a lot of coping mechanisms, and also because I'd had so much support from such a young age, I'd been able to kind of not overcome my dyslexia, but I was already doing things just naturally that I didn't realise was kind of supporting my dyslexia or helping me with my dyslexia. Then from the ages of 16 to 18, I went to a sixth form, which I loved my sixth form. It was amazing. What it was not amazing at was dyslexia. Still technically a person there. Let's just say she wasn't the most helpful. I got extra time in my exams still, but that was pretty much the extent of my dyslexia support at that school. So then when I was applying for universities the first time round, I, as part of my application progress, also applied for the DSA, which is the Disabled Student Allowance. Now, I had had assessments before, but this was the first time I'd had sort of a government sanctioned assessment, and I had to go to a special assessment centre. It took like half a day and it was a long test. I remember having to type stuff. There was like word retention things, handwriting versus typewriting. There was all these like online, like, if this word is this, what does this word mean? And like, read this, how much of it do you retain? Answer these questions. Loads of different things to test the type of dyslexia I had. I was also asked a load of questions like, do I find it easier to type? Do I find having a speech to text things useful? Do I find different coloured paper or things like that? Do they help me with reading? The end result is when I got to the University of Hull that I went to, they knew I had dyslexia. There was a lot of support in place already. I got a lot of equipment through the Disabled Student Allowance. I had a recorder so that I could record lectures, which basically meant that I didn't have to struggle to make notes while I was doing it. I was also given the opportunity to have different coloured paper. My experience at Hull with my dyslexia was really good actually. What I would like to say though is I didn't have a lot of one-on-one support at Hull. I didn't feel I needed it at the time. I had had so much growing up. I felt like I know how to cope with my dyslexia. I know what I'm doing. I'm okay. What I did get from Hull was a lot of just understanding. So I had a sheet of paper that I'd applied to all my coursework that basically said, this student has a learning disability, dyslexia. She cannot be marked down for spelling mistakes, grammar, etc. And I think that was so useful because it basically meant that if I did, get a word wrong or didn't have a comma in the right place and all this kind of stuff, it didn't count against me. They were judging me on the quality of my ideas and my thoughts, not completely how I presented it. I also did have some exams while I was in undergrad, and I did get extra time in those exams still, and I actually also got to sit them on a computer, which was the first time I'd sat exams on a computer, and it made such a big difference. One of the symptoms of my dyslexia is I am super slow at writing. I can do it, I can write and I can write neatly, but I'm slow and my wrist gets tired really quickly and I just struggle to keep up with my brain. Like my brain will be going like blah, 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 and my writing will be going blah, blah, blah. So by the time I get to the end of the sentence, my brain has forgotten what my wrist is still doing and it's just a disaster. And then you get to a word that you don't know how to spell and you sit there for 5 minutes and you're like, what is this word? And the word will be something stupid like sugarcoat and you're like, sugar, what? I should know how to spell this word and yet I don't. So writing exams was never a fun experience for me. And I don't get those problems when I'm texting or typing because my brain keeps up. My brain's going blah, 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 and my typing is going blah, 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 blah. And it works and it flows. And it was just such a better experience. And I've never gone back to doing in-person exams since because frankly, I don't got the time. To counteract that, my experience as a whole was not 100% perfect. I did have a couple of lecturers who I felt marked me down for my dyslexia, even though they shouldn't. I had one very patronising person tell me when I got 65, oh, you must be really proud of that with your dyslexia. I bet you know, that must be quite a high mark for you. And I remember I turned around to them and I said, actually, it's the lowest mark I've got this year. Normally I get in the 70s. I knew it was a bad essay, don't get me wrong, but I doubt they would have said that in that way to someone who didn't have dyslexia. So I reported them. I spoke to the dyslexia representative in my department. I don't think anything further happened, but you know, I just want to give an honest account there. My whole experience was not peachy. Then we fast forward in time. 5 years have passed. I've been out in the world and I decided to do a master's. And I do my master's at the University of Edinburgh. It's hard for me to be positive about my dyslexia experience at University of Edinburgh. I loved my time at Edinburgh. I loved the city, I loved the university, I loved the friends I made. I did not love the dyslexic support. Mainly because there wasn't any, really. One of the first things I did when I got to the University of Edinburgh was like, okay, I need to go to the dyslexic thing. That's not what it was called, but I need to go, I need to tell them I'm dyslexic, I need to see what support's available, you know, what can I do for essays, if I have any exams, my coursework, etc. So I went, I made an appointment, and I was basically told I was not dyslexic enough to warrant a proofreader. The University of Edinburgh's policy was then, and I imagine still is, oh, well, we give you enough time for you to get like a proofreader and for you to kind of have it, you know, combated so you don't need special exemptions. And I was like, well, you're not giving me a proofreader, so what do you expect me to do? It was none of the individual professors' fault or any of the lecturers. It was very much the institution. It was pretty horrible. I remember coming out of that meeting feeling very disheartened. To put it in another context, if I had been a disabled person and I had gone in and said, I can't get into this building, you've only got stairs, how do you expect me to attend my lectures? They had basically just turned around and be like, oh, well, we give you loads of warning in advance that your lecture's going to happen in this building. Can't you figure it out? You wouldn't do that. So why would you do that to someone with a mental disability or a learning disability and basically say the same thing of like, oh, well, we give you loads of advance warning that you're going to have an essay due. It's your problem to get yourself up to the same standard as your colleagues or peers who don't have dyslexia. So this is on you. I think now looking back, I should have pushed harder. I should have, you know, seen if there was anything I could do, but I wasn't confident enough. And I think that's also a very common thing with dyslexia. We don't always feel confident enough to push back or to stand up for ourselves, because even someone like me who's had a super positive experience, you are still aware that there's a lot of stigma out there. And there's a lot of people who think, oh, you're not as clever. Oh, you can't do that. I've had so many people when I tell them I'm dyslexic being like, but you're doing a PhD in English literature. And I'm like, yes, because I love reading. Then we come to where I am at now, the University of Birmingham. The approach I've taken at the University of Birmingham, and this is no reflection on the university, is I have gone very self-sufficient with my dyslexia. I haven't sought out any official support. I probably should. I'm putting that out there. I get emails from them. They're totally aware of who I am because I did declare I was dyslexic on my application. And I feel like they are trying to reach out to me and I'm just not reaching out to them, and I probably should. So that's on me. That's something I'm going to work on this year. My experience so far at the University of Birmingham has been really good. Obviously it is a bit different doing a PhD because I'm not being assessed all the time. I'm not getting back feedback in the same way as you would if you were submitting essays or coursework or exams. I've never had my supervisors really pick me up on my spelling, on my grammar, when I submit pieces of work to them. I've not had it be, highlighted as a huge issue. So in that sense, I feel good about my experience in Birmingham. I also think I have personally done a lot of things to combat my dyslexia based on what I know about my dyslexia. I've known about it since I was 8. I've had multiple assessments at this point. I still have access to those assessments, so I can see what they recommend I do. They tell me what areas I'm not as good at. So I'm very familiar with my own dyslexia and how it affects my learning and the kind of things I need to do to make it better. I'm going to share some of them with you. These are just some of the things that I now do as a PhD student with dyslexia to kind of help me learn and process information and retain information and connect ideas. I make mind maps. I am a visual person. My brain sometimes gets overwhelmed if I have long chunks of text. If I have long chunks of text, I can't always process it. I will look at it and I'll start reading it, but I won't necessarily draw the same connections. This is why I love mind maps. You've seen mind maps on my channel before. I've mentioned them in multiple videos. I'll link to one up here. I find mind maps so useful for quickly glancing, seeing the connections. Sometimes making a mind map helps me make these connections, and then also I can add more text to that, but it can be hidden away. So that's a really good way for me to process information, and a lot of information, in a kind of more ordered fashion. I also increasingly, I read out loud. I read articles out loud. I read my own work out loud, because reading out loud or using some of the features out there where you can get the software to read to you is such a good way of spotting mistakes or seeing clunky sentences or thinking, oh, that word is not the word I thought I had written. So it's such a useful way of just getting a fresh look on your piece of work or a fresh look on an article that perhaps you wouldn't have got if you had just read it in your head. Another thing for me is I very rarely read anything, if I can, in tight little texts. You get those academic books where it's all tightly put together and it's small font. They are not a friend to dyslexic people. If I can, I will get a digital version that I can blow up really big, even potentially increase the line spacing. If it's something I'm writing, I always have it on double spaced lines because I just find it easier to read. I don't want to struggle to be reading and squinting at the paper or trying to figure out what it's saying. So I get the double lines, I put it in this font I always put it into, and jobs are good. I also love the feel of pen and paper when I'm brainstorming or trying to think to myself much more than if I was typing. I love typing. Typing is definitely better for me when I'm doing finished work, if I'm doing drafts, if I'm taking extensive notes. But if I'm trying to process my thoughts, if I'm trying to pull ideas together, if I'm trying to jot down quick connections, I find that so much easier and better for me with a pen and pencil because I feel more connected to what I'm doing. There's something about having that physical aspect of it, of physically writing it down, of forming the words, that makes it a lot easier for my brain to kind of spark to life and be like, oh, this is a thing, and this is a thing, and this is a thing. So I will often just write random notes, and it's all in shortened words because I don't have time to write the full words or full notes, but I'll just write something like queer, body, this critic, blah, blah, blah. Very short, almost bullet points of this is a thing, this is a thing, this is a thing. Oh, and this links to this, and then I'll draw lines and I'll colour code it. You see my colour coding, there's a reason I do it. And I think the last thing I do, and I told my supervisor this up front, is I work best with clearly defined, manageable tasks. The first thing I would do is be like, okay, I have to write a chapter. Well, what are the stages of doing that? It's I need to research this topic, which means I need this book and this book and this book. And then I need to write a little section on this. Okay, so let's say I'll set myself a task of write 1,000 words on the queer body in X book. And that is how I do it. I have to break it down into smaller chunks, into tasks that I can complete and tick off as I go, rather than one big task that just says write a chapter or do all your data. Instead, when I'm working on my data, I will say, okay, do 200 words. Do all the entries for 2015. Do all the entries for this publisher. Or, find all the books from X subgenre. Everything I do, I break it down into small tasks so my brain doesn't get overwhelmed. And this is a symptom of my dyslexia. I know that, I've had the assessments. Again, my dyslexia might not look like your dyslexia, but for me, I need easily broken down tasks. It's why I love lists. It's why I have lists almost daily, because it just helps me work through in a logical way. I hope it has given you kind of a snapshot of what it's like to have dyslexia in higher education, the highs and the lows. And if you have dyslexia, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I'm always happy to offer support or advice, or leave a comment down below. I know not everyone will feel comfortable doing that publicly, which is why I'm saying DM me on Instagram. And yeah, you're doing amazing. Don't ever let anyone tell you you can't do something because of dyslexia, because honestly, you can do anything you set your mind to. And yeah, I don't really know how to end this video. I feel a little bit emotional talking about my dyslexia, to be honest. So I'm just going to end it here, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.